Sometimes the loudest truth arrives without making a sound. There are moments in life when nothing dramatic happens on the outside. No arguments, no explosions, no obvious mistakes. And yet, inside you, something quietly shifts. A subtle feeling appears, almost like a soft pressure behind the chest, whispering, something here no longer feels right. Not because someone is wrong, not because you are broken, weak, or overly sensitive, but because your inner frequency has begun to change, and what once felt familiar can no longer move in harmony with you. Today, I'm not here to convince you to walk away from anyone. I'm not here to tell you what decision to make. I'm simply inviting you to listen again to the voice you may have been gently silencing for a long time. Not out of ignorance, but out of kindness, out of fear of hurting someone else, or fear of what your own growth might require of you. And if you're listening right now, there's a good chance you already know the feeling I'm talking about. There is a misunderstanding in our world, especially among thoughtful, caring people. We've been taught that discomfort means something is wrong with us, that if a relationship feels heavy, confusing, or draining, we must try harder, understand more, love deeper. We assume that struggle is proof of commitment, but energy does not work that way. Your consciousness is not a machine that improves through pressure. It is more like a river. When it flows freely, life arranges itself with surprising ease. When it is forced to move against its own direction, even the strongest river begins to erode itself. Every one of us is broadcasting a signal into the quantum field, whether we realize it or not through words, not through effort, but through our state of being. Our thoughts, emotions, nervous system, and sense of self-coherence all blend into a single frequency. And here is a simple truth that changes everything. When two frequencies are deeply misaligned, closeness does not create harmony. It creates interference. This is not a moral judgment. It does not mean one person is superior and the other inferior. It simply means the signals no longer match. Think of it like tuning a radio. You can love the radio. You can respect the station. But if the frequencies are off, all you hear is static. And no amount of willpower can turn noise into music. Many people feel tired without knowing why. Not the kind of tired sleep can fix. Not the kind that comes from age or effort, but a deeper exhaustion that lingers even after rest. Often, that tiredness comes from constantly managing energetic misalignment, from holding yourself together in environments where your natural frequency is subtly pulled, questioned, or compressed, from shrinking parts of your awareness so others can remain comfortable. This kind of fatigue is not a failure. It is feedback. Your body and nervous system are extraordinarily intelligent. They register truth long before the mind creates explanations. A tightening in the chest, a fog that settles after certain conversations, a sense of being less yourself, not more. These sensations are not emotional weakness. They are biological data, energetic information, signals from a deeper navigation system that was never meant to be overridden by politeness. And yet, many spiritually minded people do override it, because we confuse unconditional love with unconditional access. True love does not demand self-betrayal. It does not ask you to disconnect from your own knowing. It does not require you to remain in spaces where your clarity dissolves. Mature love includes discernment, not judgment. Discernment. Discernment is the quiet intelligence that knows what supports your expansion and what quietly drains it. It is the ability to say yes when something opens you, and no when something consistently contracts you, without needing to justify yourself to anyone. For a long time, many of us were taught that spiritual protection means building shields, walls, defenses, rituals designed to keep the world out. But fear-based protection always carries fear into the field. And fear, no matter how spiritual it sounds, lowers coherence. Real protection comes from alignment, from being so rooted in your own frequency that what does not resonate simply cannot stay. Light does not fight darkness. It makes darkness irrelevant. However, there is a nuance that often gets missed. In intimate relationships, especially those rooted in history, obligation, or emotional entanglement, even a strong light can become exhausted. Not because it is weak, but because it is constantly compensating. When you are repeatedly holding your center just to maintain connection, the relationship is no longer nourishing you. It is costing you energy simply to remain stable. This is where many people get stuck, because walking away does not feel like love. It feels like failure. It feels selfish. It feels like giving up. But sometimes, staying is not loyalty. Sometimes, staying is avoidance. There is another layer here, one that goes deeper than this lifetime. Many sensitive, intuitive people carry memories that are not fully conscious, patterns from other experiences where their insight was dismissed. Their power was subtly controlled. Their knowing was slowly eroded until self-doubt replaced clarity. When similar energetic configurations appear again, even in different forms, the soul recognizes them instantly. The body responds, but the mind often tries to override that recognition with hope, logic, or obligation. This time will be different. Maybe I'm overthinking. I shouldn't feel this way. Yet the signal persists. Saying no in these moments is not rejection. It is recalibration. It is the moment you choose alignment over attachment, truth over familiarity, coherence over comfort. And here is something rarely said out loud. Truth does not need to argue for its existence. When something is right for you, there is a quiet sense of yes beneath the surface. It does not require constant explanation. It does not demand justification. It feels steady, grounded, and alive. When something is wrong, the mind works overtime trying to make it make sense. As your frequency changes, your life reorganizes itself, not through force, not through confrontation, but through resonance. Connections that no longer match begin to fall away naturally, not as punishment, not as drama, but as gravity. And what remains is lighter, clearer, more honest. This is not loss, it is relief. You were never meant to spend your life negotiating with your intuition. You were never meant to shrink your awareness to preserve connection. You came here to live as a signal, a clear one. When you stop forcing alignment where it does not exist, something remarkable happens. Your energy stabilizes, the fog lifts. Decisions become simpler, not because life has fewer challenges, but because you are no longer divided against yourself. You begin to move like a river that has finally stopped trying to flow uphill. And in that movement, life responds. Not because you controlled it, not because you figured it out, but because you allowed yourself to be who you already were beneath the noise. If something inside you feels quietly seen right now, trust that. You don't need more evidence. You don't need permission. Sometimes, the most profound transformation begins the moment you stop ignoring the silence that has been speaking to you all along. 1. Energetic incompatibility is not anyone's fault. Two people can be living with sincerity, each walking their own path with honesty and effort, each trying in the way they know how to grow, to heal, to become more conscious, and there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing that needs fixing or correcting. Yet there comes a moment when being close no longer feels like rest, even though nothing bad has happened on the surface. And that moment often arrives quietly, without conflict, without blame, almost like a subtle pressure you only notice once you finally slow down enough to feel it. This is not the universe punishing you, and it is not a sign that someone has failed. It is simply an indication that two frequencies, both valid in their own right, are no longer moving in the same rhythm. Energetic incompatibility is deeply misunderstood because we have been taught to frame relationships in terms of effort and morality, as if love should always feel heavy if it is real, as if difficulty is proof of depth and ease is somehow suspicious. But energy does not operate according to moral rules, and consciousness does not respond to obligation. Energy responds to resonance. When two instruments are tuned to different keys, placing them closer together does not create harmony. It creates dissonance, and no amount of goodwill can force sound waves to align if their base frequencies are different. Many people stay confused here because the mind wants reasons, stories, and explanations, while the body and the nervous system speak in sensation and feeling. You might notice that conversations leave you subtly drained, that your chest tightens slightly without obvious cause, that you feel less clear after being together even though nothing unkind was said. These signals are not accusations, they are not judgments, and they are not demands for immediate action. They are information. The body is not dramatic, it is honest, and when it senses prolonged energetic mismatch, it communicates through discomfort, long before the mind is ready to understand. It is important to say this clearly and gently. Energetic incompatibility does not mean that one person is more evolved, more spiritual, or more worthy than the other. That interpretation comes from the ego, not from truth. Two people can be equally sincere, equally loving, equally committed to growth, and still not be aligned at the level where daily proximity supports both of their expansions. Just as one person may thrive in silence while another thrives in constant interaction, one nervous system may seek openness and flow, while another seeks structure and control, and neither is wrong. They are simply different expressions of life, learning itself through contrast. When frequencies are mismatched, closeness requires effort that is subtle but continuous. You begin to adjust your tone, soften your truth, delay your impulses, second-guess your intuition, not because you are lying, but because your system is trying to maintain harmony where resonance is missing. Over time, this adjustment becomes exhausting, not in a dramatic way, but in the way a quiet leak drains water drop by drop until the reservoir is suddenly empty. People often mistake this exhaustion for personal weakness, aging, or lack of gratitude, when in fact it is the natural consequence of living out of tune with one's own energetic truth. There is also a deep compassion needed here, because many people were taught that leaving or creating distance means abandoning love. In reality, love does not disappear when proximity changes. Love is a frequency of the heart, not a physical arrangement. You can hold care, respect, and appreciation for someone, while recognizing that shared space no longer supports who you are becoming. This recognition does not negate the past, and it does not invalidate what was real. It simply honors what is true now. One of the quiet lessons that comes with maturity is learning the difference between discomfort that leads to growth and discomfort that leads to self-erasure. Growth-oriented discomfort stretches you without shrinking you. It invites expansion while preserving integrity. Energetic incompatibility, on the other hand, slowly pulls you away from yourself, asking you to compromise clarity for the sake of stability, intuition for the sake of familiarity. Over time, this creates an internal split, where you function outwardly but feel inwardly fragmented. And this fragmentation is often mistaken for anxiety or depression, when it is actually misalignment. It is also worth remembering that life is not static, and neither are frequencies. People evolve, soften, harden, awaken, retreat, and shift in countless ways throughout their lives. An energetic match in one season may become a mismatch in another, not because anyone failed, but because movement is the nature of consciousness. Holding on to an old alignment out of loyalty can quietly prevent both people from entering the next phase of their growth, and this is one of the most painful truths to accept because it challenges the idea that commitment alone can override energetic reality. When you finally allow yourself to see energetic incompatibility without blame, something inside relaxes. The inner debate quiets down. You stop trying to prove that your feelings are justified, and you stop trying to diagnose what is wrong with the other person. In that space, clarity begins to return, not as a dramatic revelation, but as a gentle sense of grounding, like finally standing on solid ground after walking on uneven terrain for a long time. You realize that nothing needs to be fixed in order for truth to be acknowledged. This is where compassion becomes spacious rather than heavy. You can honor the path another person is on without needing to walk it with them. You can appreciate what was shared without forcing it to continue beyond its natural season. You can allow distance, whether emotional or physical, to form not as a punishment, but as a recalibration, a respectful recognition of difference. In this way, separation, when it occurs, becomes an act of honesty rather than rejection. Perhaps the most liberating understanding is this: when something is truly aligned, you do not have to convince yourself to stay. The body softens, the breath deepens, and presence feels natural rather than managed. When something is not aligned, the effort to remain coherent becomes the loudest signal of all. Learning to trust that signal is not selfish, and it is not unloving. It is an act of self-respect that allows love to remain clean rather than resentful. Energetic incompatibility is not a verdict on anyone's worth, and it is not a failure of intention. It is simply the honest language of consciousness, communicating through sensation, emotion, and intuition. When you listen to it without fear, you stop fighting reality and begin cooperating with it. And in that cooperation, life often becomes quieter, clearer, and surprisingly kind. 2. Your energy field is a broadcasting system. Every moment you are alive, whether you are aware of it or not, you are transmitting something into the quantum field around you, not through effort or intention alone, but through your state of being, your thoughts, your emotional tone, the way your nervous system is regulated or dysregulated, the level of presence you inhabit throughout the day. All of it blends together into a signal that is continuously moving outward from you, like a quiet radio transmission that never shuts off. This is not mystical language meant to impress or confuse. It is simply how consciousness behaves when it takes form. You are not only responding to life, you are participating in its ongoing creation by what you are consistently radiating. Most people believe they communicate primarily through words and actions, but words are only the surface layer. Beneath them lies the deeper conversation, the one happening through energy. You have felt this before, even if you never named it. You have walked into a room and immediately sensed tension without anyone speaking. You have met someone who felt calming before they ever smiled. You have trusted or distrusted a situation without logical explanation. These experiences are not imagination. They are your system reading energetic information and translating it into felt knowing. Your energy field functions much like a tuning fork. It vibrates at a certain frequency based on your level of awareness, emotional integration, and inner coherence. When you are rested, honest with yourself, and aligned with what feels true, your signal is clean. It is steady. It carries clarity. When you are anxious, self-betraying, or suppressing your intuition, your signal becomes fragmented, not because you are failing, but because internal conflict always distorts transmission. The field does not punish you. It simply reflects your state back to you through experience. When another person enters your intimate space, their signal interacts with yours. This interaction is unavoidable. Energy does not respect personal boundaries unless consciousness establishes them. Proximity creates influence, not because anyone intends harm, but because fields overlap and systems affect one another. This is where many people misunderstand what happens in close relationships. They believe that if someone is physically present but emotionally neutral, no exchange is occurring. In reality, the deepest exchanges are happening beneath awareness, long before conversation or behavior becomes noticeable. When a lower or incompatible frequency enters your intimate field, it does not simply coexist alongside yours. Frequencies interact. They interfere. They modulate one another. This is basic physics applied to consciousness. Just as two sound waves can amplify or cancel each other out, energetic frequencies can either enhance clarity or introduce static. When the interference is subtle, you may not notice it immediately. You may simply feel slightly off, less focused, less inspired, less connected to yourself than usual. Over time, that subtle distortion accumulates. This is why certain relationships are not dramatically harmful, yet still deeply draining. There is no obvious abuse, no overt manipulation, no clear villain, and yet, you feel as though you are constantly recalibrating yourself after interactions, needing time alone to remember who you are, needing silence to return to center. This is not coincidence. It is the result of your original signal being gently but persistently bent out of shape by prolonged exposure to an incompatible frequency. It is important to approach this understanding without fear. Many people hear language about frequency and immediately become defensive, worrying that they are being asked to judge others or see themselves as superior. That is not what this is about. Frequency is not a moral hierarchy. It is not about good versus bad, awake versus asleep, spiritual versus unspiritual. Frequency simply describes how energy is organized and expressed. Two people can be equally kind, equally well-intentioned, and still generate interference when brought too close together for too long. Think of it like two radio stations broadcasting on neighboring channels. Both stations are legitimate, both have their own audience. But when their signals overlap too closely, the sound becomes distorted. The problem is not the stations themselves, it is the proximity. Separation restores clarity without condemning either source. In the same way, space in relationships is not always abandonment. Sometimes, it is the most respectful solution available. When your signal is distorted for extended periods, the effects show up in very practical ways. Decision-making becomes harder. Intuition feels unreliable. You start doubting things you once knew with certainty. You may feel mentally foggy, emotionally flat, or strangely unmotivated. These symptoms are often blamed on stress, aging, or personal inadequacy. But at their root, they are often energetic feedback. Your system is telling you that too much static has entered the field, and clarity is being compromised. One of the most painful aspects of this process is how invisible it can be. Because there is no obvious cause, the mind turns inward and assumes fault. You ask yourself why you cannot just be grateful, why you feel restless, why contentment seems just out of reach. You try to fix yourself instead of listening to the signal. This is how people stay stuck for years, not because they lack intelligence or insight, but because they have learned to mistrust their own energetic perception. Your original signal, the one you were born with, is not meant to be managed constantly. It is meant to flow. When you are in environments and relationships that support your frequency, your energy feels self-sustaining. You give without depletion. You rest without guilt. You feel more yourself, not less. This is not fantasy. It is the natural state of coherence. Life still has challenges, but those challenges do not fragment your identity. They strengthen it. Lower or incompatible frequencies do not always announce themselves dramatically. Often they arrive quietly, disguised as familiarity, obligation, or comfort. They may feel safe because they are known, even if they are no longer nourishing. Over time, the price of that familiarity becomes internal noise. You lose access to the subtle guidance that once felt natural. Your inner compass does not disappear, but its signal becomes harder to hear through the interference. Understanding yourself as a broadcasting system changes how you relate to responsibility. You stop trying to fix others, and you stop blaming yourself. Instead, you begin to ask different questions. You ask what environments allow your signal to remain clean. You ask which interactions leave you clearer afterward, and which require recovery. You begin to see boundaries not as walls, but as tuning mechanisms, ways of maintaining signal integrity, so that what you transmit is actually true to who you are. This awareness also brings a deep sense of humility. You realize that influence is always mutual, even when intentions are good. You realize that love alone does not guarantee coherence. You realize that sometimes the most loving act is not to stay, not to push, not to convince, but to step back and allow frequencies to settle into places where they can express themselves without distortion. When you honor the fact that your energy field is always broadcasting, you begin to treat your inner state with more care. You rest more intentionally. You listen more closely. You choose honesty over performance. You stop forcing yourself into spaces that require constant adjustment. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, your signal strengthens. It becomes clearer. It carries farther. Life begins to respond not because you demanded it to, but because coherence is magnetic. The quantum field does not respond to effort. It responds to alignment. When your broadcast is clean, what matches it finds you without struggle. When it is distorted, even the right opportunities arrive tangled. This is not punishment. It is feedback. And when you finally understand that, you stop fighting the noise and start protecting the signal. Not through fear or control, but through gentle, consistent respect for your own energetic truth. Your energy field was never meant to be a battleground. It was meant to be a transmission, and when you allow it to remain honest, undistorted, and alive, you remember something simple and profound. Life does not ask you to become louder, stronger, or more convincing. It asks you to become clearer. 3. Not all exhaustion comes from life. There is a kind of tiredness that sleep does not touch, a fatigue that lingers even after rest, even after weekends, even after you have done everything you were told should make you feel better. And this exhaustion often confuses people because it does not match the visible facts of their lives. Work may be manageable, health may be acceptable, circumstances may even look calm from the outside, and yet, inside, there is a weariness that feels older, heavier, and harder to name, as if something has been slowly draining you without ever announcing itself loudly enough to be blamed. This kind of exhaustion is rarely about effort alone. It is not the tiredness of building something meaningful or moving through a natural season of challenge. It is the tiredness that comes from continuous self-regulation in an environment where your natural frequency is not fully supported. It is the fatigue of constantly adjusting, softening, explaining, holding back, or staying alert at a subtle level, even when you want to relax. Over time, this quiet vigilance consumes far more energy than physical labor ever could. Many people assume exhaustion is a sign that they are doing too much, when in truth, it is often a sign that they are being too far away from themselves for too long. When you are near an energy that does not resonate with your own, your system begins to compensate automatically. You may not notice it at first, because the compensation is gentle. You speak a little less honestly. You feel a little more guarded. You monitor reactions. You stay mentally present when your body wants to rest. None of this feels dramatic, but it is continuous, and continuity is what makes it costly. This is why some people feel more tired after social interaction than after a full day of work, even when those interactions are polite, loving, or familiar. The nervous system is not responding to kindness alone. It is responding to coherence. When coherence is missing, the system works overtime to maintain internal balance. This is not a personal flaw. It is a biological and energetic reality. The body is always seeking homeostasis, and when the environment disrupts that balance, even subtly, the body must spend energy to restore it. There is also a deep misunderstanding around age and exhaustion. Many people accept tiredness as an inevitable part of getting older, when in reality, much of what is attributed to age is actually accumulated misalignment. Years spent overriding intuition, tolerating energetic friction, and prioritizing stability over truth slowly take their toll. This does not mean aging is wrong or avoidable, but it does mean that vitality is often less about youth and more about alignment. People who live closer to their truth often carry a quiet aliveness that has nothing to do with numbers and everything to do with coherence. Another layer of this exhaustion comes from emotional labor that is rarely acknowledged. Being near an incompatible energy often means unconsciously managing the emotional field. You sense shifts in mood, you anticipate reactions, you adjust timing, wording, and expression to avoid tension. Even when done with love, this constant calibration drains the system. The body was not designed to remain in low-grade alertness indefinitely. It was designed to move between engagement and rest, between expression and silence, without losing itself in the process. One of the most painful aspects of this kind of fatigue is the self-blame that often follows. When you cannot explain your tiredness logically, you may conclude that something is wrong with you. You may push yourself harder, believing discipline will fix what awareness is actually trying to reveal. You may seek motivation, stimulation, or distraction, hoping to override the signal rather than listening to it. In doing so, the exhaustion deepens, not because you are failing, but because the message is being ignored. There is a difference between healthy tiredness and misalignment exhaustion. Healthy tiredness has a sense of completion to it. You feel spent, but satisfied. Rest restores you. Misalignment exhaustion feels empty. Rest helps temporarily, but the heaviness returns as soon as you re-enter the same energetic context. This is because the source of the fatigue is not activity, but proximity. Until the proximity changes, the body continues to compensate, and compensation always has a cost. It is important to understand that this does not mean you must immediately leave every situation that tires you. Life requires effort, and growth is not always comfortable. The distinction lies in whether the effort expands you or diminishes you. Expansion may be tiring, but it feels meaningful. Diminishment feels draining without reward. The body knows the difference, even when the mind argues otherwise. Many people discover this truth only after distance is created, sometimes unintentionally. A break, a separation, a change in routine suddenly brings unexpected energy back. Clarity returns. Motivation resurfaces without force. This is often when people realize that what they thought was burnout was actually energetic depletion from sustained misalignment. The relief can feel surprising, even unsettling, because it challenges long-held assumptions about responsibility and endurance. There is a quiet courage required to acknowledge this form of exhaustion, because it often asks you to reconsider what you have normalized. It asks you to question relationships, environments, or roles you have adapted to for years. This questioning can feel destabilizing, especially for those who value loyalty and consistency. But honoring exhaustion is not betrayal. It is self-honesty. It is recognizing that the body has limits, and that those limits are not obstacles, but guidance. When you stop forcing yourself to stay energetically upright in spaces that pull you off center, something begins to heal on its own. The nervous system softens. Breathing deepens without effort. Thoughts slow down. You remember what it feels like to be present without monitoring yourself. This is not escape. It is restoration. It is the body returning to a rhythm it has always known but temporarily forgot. There is also compassion needed for the part of you that stayed as long as it did. You stayed because you cared. You stayed because you hoped. You stayed because you believed endurance was love. None of that was wrong. But there comes a point where continued endurance is no longer growth. It becomes erosion. Recognizing that point is not weakness. It is maturity. Not all exhaustion comes from life being demanding. Some exhaustion comes from life asking you to be someone you are no longer meant to be. When you are constantly holding yourself in place to maintain harmony that no longer exists naturally, your system will eventually ask for change. It does so through fatigue, fog, and loss of vitality, not as punishment, but as protection. When you finally listen, the solution is rarely dramatic. Often it is subtle. More space, more honesty, fewer explanations, less self-abandonment. Over time, energy returns not because circumstances magically improve, but because you are no longer spending it fighting your own signal. You begin to realize that rest is not just about stopping activity. It is about stopping misalignment. True rest happens when you no longer have to hold yourself together, when you can exhale without calculation, when your presence feels enough without adjustment. That kind of rest is deeply healing, and it reminds you of something essential and simple. Your energy was never meant to be managed constantly. It was meant to flow, and when it flows in the right environments, life feels lighter, clearer, and quietly supportive again. 4. Compassion does not mean the absence of boundaries. There is a quiet misunderstanding that lives inside many kind and awakening hearts. A belief formed not from wisdom, but from survival. And it sounds something like this. If I am truly loving, I should be able to endure anything. If I am truly spiritual, I should not need boundaries. If my heart is open enough, nothing should harm me. This belief is rarely spoken aloud, but it shapes countless decisions, keeping people in situations that slowly drain them, while convincing them that staying is proof of maturity, and leaving would be a failure of love. Unconditional love is one of the most beautiful capacities of the human heart, but it has often been misunderstood and misapplied. Loving without conditions does not mean allowing unlimited access to your inner world. It does not mean tolerating ongoing harm, confusion, or depletion. It does not mean abandoning your own truth in order to preserve connection. When unconditional love is stripped of discernment, it stops being love and quietly becomes self-erasure. Many awakening souls learned early in life that being loved required adaptation. They learned to read rooms, soften edges, and anticipate needs. Over time, this sensitivity became a strength, but it also became a habit of over-accommodation. When these souls later encountered spiritual teachings about compassion and unity, they often interpreted them through this old lens, believing that growth meant becoming endlessly available, endlessly understanding, endlessly forgiving, even when their bodies and inner guidance were clearly asking for space. Discernment is not judgment. It is not coldness. It is not a lack of empathy. Discernment is the quiet intelligence that notices how something actually affects you, not how it should affect you in theory. It is the ability to feel the difference between what expands your nervous system and what contracts it, between what brings you closer to yourself and what pulls you away. Discernment is the meeting point between love and truth, where compassion is guided by clarity rather than guilt. Without discernment, compassion becomes indiscriminate. It flows everywhere. including into places where it cannot be received or reciprocated in healthy ways. This kind of compassion eventually collapses under its own weight, leaving resentment, exhaustion, and confusion in its wake. People then blame themselves for feeling bitter or withdrawn, not realizing that what failed was not their love, but their lack of boundaries around it. Boundaries are often misunderstood as walls, but mature boundaries are not rigid structures meant to keep others out. They are living agreements with yourself about what you will and will not participate in. They are expressions of self-respect, not defenses against attack. When boundaries come from fear, they harden. When they come from clarity, they remain flexible, responsive, and humane. There is a deep relief that comes when you realize you are allowed to say no without explaining your entire inner world. You are allowed to step back without turning your choice into a moral argument. You are allowed to honor your limits without making anyone else wrong. This realization does not come easily for those who were praised for being accommodating or punished for asserting themselves. It requires unlearning the belief that love must be proven through endurance. Many people stay in energetically incompatible situations because they confuse discomfort with growth. Growth can be uncomfortable, but it does not require chronic self-abandonment. Growth stretches you, but it does not consistently shrink you. When a situation demands that you silence your intuition, manage your nervous system constantly, or justify your own needs, it is not asking you to grow. It is asking you to disappear in small, polite ways. Discernment asks a simple but profound question. Does this connection support my wholeness, or does it require me to fragment myself? This question is not asked once, but repeatedly, as circumstances evolve. What was supportive in one season may not be in another. Holding on to an old configuration, out of loyalty, can quietly block the next stage of becoming. This does not mean the past was wrong. It means life has moved. There is often grief in this realization, because boundaries can feel like loss. They change dynamics. They disappoint expectations. They challenge identities built around being needed or being agreeable. But grief does not mean you are doing something wrong. It means you are telling the truth. And truth, when honored gently, eventually brings peace rather than regret. Compassion guided by discernment is quieter than performative kindness. It does not announce itself. It does not seek approval. It simply aligns action with inner knowing. This kind of compassion understands that not every relationship is meant to be intimate, that distance can be an act of respect, and that love does not disappear just because form changes. In fact, love often becomes cleaner and less entangled when boundaries are honored. One of the most healing shifts a person can make is realizing that their worth is not measured by how much they tolerate. You do not become more evolved by staying in situations that consistently dull your clarity. You do not prove your spirituality by overriding your body's signals. Wisdom does not ask you to suffer silently in the name of growth. Wisdom asks you to listen. Boundaries also protect others from the consequences of unconscious dependency. When you continuously give beyond your capacity, you deprive others of the opportunity to meet themselves. You maintain imbalances that feel familiar but prevent real connection. Saying no, when done with integrity, can be an invitation for growth on both sides, even if it is not received that way initially. It is important to acknowledge that discernment develops through experience, often through pain. Many people learn the value of boundaries only after crossing their own limits repeatedly. There is no shame in this. It is part of the human learning curve. What matters is that when the lesson becomes clear, you allow yourself to change, even if that change feels uncomfortable at first. When compassion is rooted in discernment, it becomes sustainable. You can care without losing yourself. You can remain open without being porous. You can love without negotiating your truth. This is not a hardened state. It is a grounded one. It allows you to meet others from a place of fullness rather than obligation. There is a subtle confidence that emerges when you begin to trust your discernment. You stop asking whether your needs are reasonable. You stop seeking permission to protect your energy. You stop over-explaining. This confidence is not loud or defensive. It is calm. It feels like standing on solid ground after years of walking on shifting sand. Mature love understands that boundaries are not obstacles to connection, but conditions for healthy connection. Without them, relationships become arenas of confusion and quiet resentment. With them, relationships become clearer, even if fewer. And clarity, though sometimes lonely at first, is deeply nourishing in the long run. Compassion without boundaries leads to burnout. Boundaries without compassion lead to isolation. But when compassion and discernment move together, something rare and beautiful emerges. Relationships that honor truth, environments that support coherence, and a life that no longer requires you to betray yourself in order to belong. This is not a lesson learned overnight. It is learned slowly, through listening, through noticing patterns, through feeling the cost of staying silent, and the relief of speaking honestly. When you finally allow discernment to guide your compassion, you realize something quietly liberating. Love was never asking you to disappear. It was asking you to arrive, fully and truthfully, exactly as you are. 5. Spiritual protection is not defense. There is a quiet relief that comes when you finally understand that spiritual protection was never meant to feel like tension in the body or constant alertness in the mind, because protection rooted in fear always keeps the nervous system on edge, subtly bracing for impact, subtly expecting intrusion, subtly believing that danger is just around the corner. Many people were taught, directly or indirectly, that to stay safe they must build walls, perform rituals, shield themselves from others, or remain emotionally guarded at all times. And while these strategies may offer temporary comfort, they often create a life lived in contraction rather than in truth. You were not meant to live clenched. You were not meant to hold your breath through your days, scanning for threats, managing impressions, or preparing defenses against energies that may never come. True spiritual protection does not arise from tightening your field. It arises from inhabiting it fully. It is not something you put on like armor. It is something that naturally emerges when you are aligned with who you actually are beneath conditioning, fear, and habit. Defense implies an enemy. Defense implies separation. Defense implies that something outside of you has power over your inner state. While this mindset can feel necessary after experiences of betrayal, manipulation, or energetic harm, it eventually becomes limiting. Living defensively trains the body to expect intrusion, and expectation itself becomes a form of invitation. The quantum field responds not to what you say you want, but to what you consistently assume to be true. When you are rooted in your authentic frequency, you do not need to defend it. Frequencies that are incompatible cannot remain in close proximity for long without discomfort. Just as oil and water separate naturally without force, energies that do not resonate eventually drift apart when no effort is made to hold them together. This separation is not violent. It is not dramatic. It is quiet and self-correcting. Many people mistake constant vigilance for strength. They believe that being spiritually awake means being perpetually aware of manipulation, shadow, or negativity. But living with that focus keeps the mind oriented toward what it fears, rather than what it embodies. Awareness does not require obsession. Clarity does not require suspicion. Wisdom does not demand hypervigilance. In fact, the more present and embodied you become, the less energy you have for fear-based monitoring, because your system learns to trust itself again. The highest form of protection is coherence. When your thoughts, emotions, body, and actions are aligned, your field becomes stable. Stability is not rigidity, it is integrity. In this state, you are not easily pulled into other people's emotional storms, not because you are closed, but because you are grounded. You can witness without absorbing. You can listen without collapsing. You can care without entangling. This is why people who are deeply aligned often appear calm, even in chaotic environments. Their calm is not apathy. It is not avoidance. It is the natural result of not being internally divided. They are not fighting themselves, so there is nothing for external chaos to hook into. Their presence itself becomes a boundary, not because it pushes away, but because it does not offer entry points for distortion. Living in your true frequency requires honesty, and honesty is far more protective than any ritual. When you stop pretending, stop performing, stop saying yes when your body says no, your energy begins to settle into a clear shape. This shape is not aggressive, it is unmistakable. People who cannot resonate with it will often feel uncomfortable without knowing why. They may withdraw, they may project, they may lose interest, None of this requires your involvement. It is simply how fields interact. One of the deepest fears people carry is the belief that if they stop defending themselves, they will be harmed. This fear usually comes from past experiences where boundaries were violated and protection felt absent. Healing does not come from recreating those defenses forever. Healing comes from rebuilding trust in your ability to sense, respond, and move when something is not right. Protection is dynamic. It adapts. It listens. It does not freeze you in place. When you are fully present in your own frequency, your body responds quickly to misalignment. You feel it early. You notice subtle shifts before they become overwhelming. This early awareness allows for gentle adjustment rather than dramatic reaction. You step back sooner. You speak more honestly. You rest before depletion sets in. This responsiveness is protection in motion, not protection through resistance. There is also a misconception that spiritual protection means cutting yourself off from the world or limiting connection. In reality, the opposite is often true. When you are aligned, you can be more open because openness no longer equals vulnerability to harm. Vulnerability without boundaries is exposure. Vulnerability with self-trust is strength. The difference lies not in how much you share, but in whether you remain connected to yourself while sharing. People who rely heavily on defensive protection often feel isolated, even when surrounded by others. Their walls keep out harm, but they also keep out nourishment. Over time, this creates loneliness disguised as safety. Alignment-based protection, on the other hand, allows connection without self-betrayal. You do not need to disappear to stay safe. You simply need to stay present with yourself. Another quiet truth is that you cannot protect yourself by controlling others. Monitoring their behavior, anticipating their reactions, or managing their emotions is exhausting and ineffective. Control is not protection. It is anxiety attempting to feel safe. True protection comes from releasing the need to manage outcomes and trusting your capacity to respond if and when something arises. When you live from your authentic frequency, you stop negotiating your boundaries internally. You no longer debate whether your feelings are valid. You no longer need external confirmation to honor your limits. This inner consistency sends a clear signal into the field. It says, without words, that you are not available for dynamics that require self-abandonment. This signal is remarkably effective because it is not forced. It is embodied. There will always be moments of discomfort in life. Alignment does not make you immune to pain or challenge. What it does is reduce unnecessary suffering. It removes the layer of exhaustion that comes from pretending, enduring, or over-accommodating. It allows challenges to be met directly, without the added burden of internal conflict. This is a form of protection that feels like relief rather than defense. It is also important to acknowledge that learning to trust this kind of protection takes time. If you have lived defensively for years, relaxing those habits can feel unsafe at first. The body may need reassurance. This reassurance does not come from forcing openness, but from small, consistent experiences of honoring yourself and seeing that the world does not collapse when you do. Each time you listen to your inner signal and act on it gently, trust is rebuilt. Spiritual protection rooted in authenticity does not ask you to harden. It asks you to soften into truth. It asks you to stop bracing and start inhabiting. It invites you to stand fully in your own presence and let that presence do the work. In that state, protection is no longer something you seek. It is something you are. When you are fully in your true frequency, incompatible energies do not need to be fought or expelled. They simply cannot stay. There is no drama in this, no victory, no loss. Just a natural sorting, like leaves, carried by different currents drifting to different shores. You remain where you are, steady and whole, while what does not resonate moves on. This is the simplicity hidden beneath so many complex teachings. You do not need to be on guard. You do not need to be armored. You do not need to live in constant self-protection mode. The highest protection is coherence. The deepest safety is self-trust. And the most powerful boundary is the quiet, embodied truth of being fully yourself, without apology and without fear. 6. In intimate relationships, light can be depleted. There is a comforting idea many sensitive and spiritually inclined people carry, often without realizing it. And that idea says that love is meant to endure everything, that light is meant to stay present no matter the conditions, that if you are truly conscious, patient, and awake, you should be able to transform darkness simply by remaining loving. This belief usually comes from a sincere place, from a desire to heal rather than harm, to unite rather than separate. And yet it hides a quiet misunderstanding that can slowly drain the very light it seeks to protect. Light does have the capacity to illuminate darkness, but illumination is not the same as endurance. True transformation happens when light is stable, relaxed, and rooted in its own source. The moment light must strain to remain itself. The moment it must tighten, brace, or overexert simply to stay present. It is no longer transforming anything. It is spending itself. And what is spent continuously without replenishment does not become brighter. It becomes dimmer, quieter, and eventually exhausted. In intimate relationships, the exchange of energy is constant and profound. These are not casual encounters where you can step back easily or reset your system without consequence. Intimacy opens the deepest layers of the nervous system, the places where safety, trust, and belonging are encoded. When intimacy is aligned, it nourishes. It gives back more than it takes. You feel clearer after connection, not more confused. You feel steadier, not destabilized. Your sense of self becomes more whole, not fragmented. But when intimacy is built on energetic mismatch, something subtle and persistent begins to happen. You notice that your natural state of ease requires effort. You remain calm, but only by holding tension underneath. You stay compassionate, but only by suppressing parts of your truth. You maintain clarity, but only by constantly monitoring yourself. This ongoing management becomes invisible because it happens inside, yet it costs enormous energy over time. Many people mistake this effort for commitment. They believe that relationships are meant to require constant work, that love is proven through endurance, and that difficulty is a sign of depth. While all meaningful relationships require care, effort is not meant to be the baseline. When effort becomes constant, something fundamental is out of alignment. Growth challenges you, but it does not require you to continuously override your own system just to stay present. Light transforms darkness through presence, not pressure. Presence is relaxed. It is spacious. It does not argue with what is. When you are truly present, your energy radiates naturally, and whatever can meet it does so without force. Darkness, in this sense, is not evil. It is simply unintegrated energy. But unintegrated energy cannot be integrated by force. It responds only to stable, non-resisting awareness. When you are in an intimate dynamic where the other person operates from control, unconsciousness, or unresolved inner conflict, your light may initially feel powerful. You may notice that your presence calms them, that your clarity stabilizes them, that your understanding softens their edges. This can create the illusion that transformation is happening, and sometimes, in small ways, it is. But over time, if the other person does not take responsibility for their own integration, the dynamic shifts. Your light is no longer illuminating. It is compensating. Compensation is exhausting because it asks your system to do work that does not belong to it. You become the regulator, the stabilizer, the emotional anchor, often without realizing it. You feel responsible for maintaining harmony. You sense that if you relax, things might fall apart. This responsibility creates a constant low-grade tension that drains vitality. You are no longer resting into your light. You are holding it up. This is the point where many spiritually minded people become confused. They feel tired, resentful, or disconnected from themselves, and they judge these feelings as spiritual failure. They believe that if they were truly loving, they would not feel this way. In reality, these feelings are not signs of failure. They are signs of overextension. They are signals from the body and nervous system that the exchange has become unbalanced. Transformation does not require sacrifice of the self. When transformation asks you to disappear, to mute your intuition, or to numb your natural responses, it is not transformation. It is self-abandonment, disguised as love. True spiritual maturity includes the wisdom to recognize when a dynamic no longer supports mutual growth. This recognition does not diminish compassion. it refines it. One of the hardest truths to accept is that you cannot heal someone by staying longer than your system can sustain. Healing is not something you give another person at the expense of yourself. It is something each person must participate in willingly. When one person does all the regulating, all the grounding, all the holding, the relationship stops being a shared field and becomes a one-sided labor. There is also a grief that arises when you realize this, because you may genuinely care. You may see potential. You may remember moments of connection that felt real and meaningful. Letting go of the role of transformer can feel like giving up hope, but hope that requires self-erasure is not hope. It is denial, and denial always has a cost. Light that is constantly challenged without support eventually dims, not because it is weak, but because it is being consumed. This dimming often shows up as loss of joy, loss of creativity, loss of motivation, or a feeling of being less alive. People describe it as feeling like a shadow of themselves, or as if their inner spark has gone quiet. This is not a mystery. It is the natural result of prolonged energetic depletion. It is important to say this without blame or drama. The other person is not necessarily malicious. Often they are unconscious. Often they are struggling in ways they do not understand. But understanding does not require you to remain in harm's way. Compassion does not mean staying where your light cannot replenish itself. Compassion includes care for your own well-being. There is a subtle but powerful distinction between holding space and holding yourself together. Holding space feels open. It allows breath. It allows movement. Holding yourself together feels tight. It restricts. It requires vigilance. If you find that you cannot relax into your own presence in a relationship, that is information worth listening to. Your system is telling you something important. When you release the belief that your light must save or stabilize others, something softens inside. You begin to recognize that your primary responsibility is not to maintain a dynamic, but to remain coherent with your own truth. This does not make you selfish. It makes you honest. And honesty is far more healing than endurance. Stepping back from a draining intimate dynamic does not mean your light has failed. It means your light has chosen to protect its source. When light remains connected to its source, it naturally shines. When it disconnects from that source to sustain another, it fades. There is no virtue in fading for the sake of loyalty. Often, when space is created, clarity returns. You feel your energy coming back. Your intuition sharpens. Your sense of self stabilizes. You realize that what you thought was love was mixed with fear, obligation, or the need to be needed. This realization can be painful, but it is also liberating. It frees you from roles you were never meant to play. True intimacy does not require you to hold your breath. It does not require constant self-regulation. It does not require you to dim your light so someone else can remain comfortable. True intimacy allows you to rest in who you are, trusting that the connection will either meet you there or naturally dissolve without force. Light is powerful, but it is not infinite when it is cut off from rest, truth, and replenishment. Recognizing when your light is being depleted is not a failure of love. It is an awakening of wisdom. It is the moment you realize that your presence is sacred and that where you place it matters. When you stop forcing transformation and allow alignment to guide you, something profound happens. Your light becomes whole again. It no longer strains. It no longer flickers. It simply is. And in that state, it does not need to convince, rescue, or endure. It shines quietly, steadily, and those who can resonate with it will feel nourished by its presence, while those who cannot will naturally drift away. This is not loss. It is restoration. It is the return of light to its own source, where it was always meant to live, not as a tool for survival, but as a natural expression of being alive. 7. Many present relationships are echoes of old memories. There is a quiet relief that arrives when you finally realize that repeated relational patterns are not proof of bad luck or poor judgment, but invitations to remember something unfinished within the soul. Many people carry a subtle shame about their relationship history, asking themselves why they keep encountering similar dynamics despite their awareness, growth, and good intentions. Yet this question often arises from misunderstanding rather than truth. What repeats is rarely random. It is patterned, and patterns exist because something once learned for survival has not yet been fully released. You are not drawn again and again to similar relationships because you are broken or naive. You are drawn because your system recognizes familiarity before it recognizes safety. Long before the mind evaluates character, the nervous system responds to resonance, and resonance does not distinguish between what is nourishing and what is known. What is known feels safe, even when it is painful, because it is predictable. This is one of the most tender truths to face, and it asks for compassion rather than self-judgment. Many souls have lived through experiences where their intuition was questioned, overridden, or subtly dismissed. These experiences do not always look dramatic. They may have unfolded quietly, through environments where obedience was praised over authenticity, where harmony was valued more than truth, where love felt conditional upon compliance. Over time, the soul learns a lesson that is never spoken aloud. To belong, I must doubt myself. To stay connected, I must soften my knowing. To be loved, I must tolerate confusion. These lessons do not disappear simply because you become conscious of them. They imprint themselves into the nervous system and energetic memory. They shape what feels familiar, what feels attractive, and what feels like home. When you later encounter someone who carries a similar energetic configuration, not necessarily the same personality or behavior, but the same underlying pattern of control, doubt, or emotional instability, something in you responds instantly. The soul recognizes the frequency. It says, "I know this terrain." Meanwhile, the mind, eager for resolution, says, "This time will be different." The mind's optimism is not foolish. It is hopeful. It wants healing without loss. It wants redemption of the past without the pain of letting go. So it constructs stories that explain away discomfort, that minimize warning signs, that reframe old patterns as growth opportunities. This is not denial born of ignorance. It is denial born of longing, longing to finally complete something that was never resolved. What often goes unseen is that the soul does not repeat patterns to punish itself. It repeats them to be witnessed with awareness. Each repetition is an invitation to choose differently, not by force, but by clarity. The soul does not seek to relive pain. It seeks to liberate the energy bound within the pain by bringing it into conscious choice rather than unconscious reenactment. When a familiar pattern appears, the body often reacts before the mind can form words. There may be a tightening in the chest, a subtle anxiety, a feeling of walking on eggshells that emerges without explanation. These sensations are not irrational. They are memory without narrative. They are the body remembering what the mind has not yet acknowledged. If these signals are ignored, the pattern deepens. If they are honored, something begins to shift. One of the most difficult aspects of breaking these cycles is that the early stages of familiar dynamics often feel intensely meaningful. There is recognition, intensity, a sense of being seen or needed. This intensity can be mistaken for connection, when in reality it is often activation. Activation stirs old wounds and old hopes simultaneously, creating a sense of urgency that feels like destiny. Without awareness, this urgency pulls people quickly into roles they have played before, roles that feel purposeful, but ultimately draining. The mind often resists acknowledging this truth because it fears what recognition might require. If this is a pattern, then something must change. Change threatens identity, attachments, and narratives built over years. It challenges the belief that endurance equals love, and that staying longer will eventually lead to resolution. Letting go of this belief can feel like admitting defeat, when in reality, it is an act of profound self-respect. There is also grief here. Grief for the self who learned to survive by doubting its own knowing. Grief for the times when intuition spoke softly and was overridden by fear of loss. Grief for the years spent trying to earn safety rather than trusting it. This grief is not a setback. It is a necessary passage. It marks the moment when the soul stops asking for repetition and starts asking for truth. As awareness grows, something subtle but powerful happens. The pattern no longer feels invisible. You begin to see it not as a personal flaw, but as a conditioned response. You notice the familiar pull earlier. You recognize the internal negotiation sooner. You hear the voice that says, maybe this time, and gently question it rather than obeying it automatically. This questioning is not harsh. It is curious. It asks, what am I trying to complete here? And does this situation actually offer that completion? Breaking a pattern does not always require dramatic exits or confrontations. Sometimes it begins with internal honesty, with naming what is happening without justification, with allowing yourself to feel disappointment without turning it into self-blame, with choosing to pause rather than rush toward familiarity. These small shifts disrupt the momentum of old cycles and create space for new possibilities to emerge. It is important to understand that when a pattern loosens, there may be a period of emptiness. Familiar intensity is gone, but true connection has not yet arrived. This space can feel unsettling, especially for those who are accustomed to emotional highs and lows. Yet this quiet is not absence. It is recalibration. It is the nervous system, learning what safety feels like without drama, what connection feels like without confusion. As the soul integrates these lessons, attraction itself begins to change. What once felt exciting may begin to feel exhausting. What once felt familiar may begin to feel constricting. Meanwhile, what is calm, steady, and respectful may initially feel unfamiliar, even boring. This does not mean something is wrong. It means your system is learning a new language, one rooted in coherence rather than survival. Old patterns do not disappear because you judge them or force them away. They dissolve when they are understood. Understanding does not mean intellectual analysis alone. It means feeling the cost of repetition fully and allowing that feeling to inform your choices. It means recognizing that you no longer need to prove your worth through endurance or patience. You no longer need to stay in situations that require you to doubt yourself to belong. When the soul finally feels heard, it stops shouting through repetition. It relaxes. It begins to trust that you are listening now. This trust restores a sense of inner alignment that had been fragmented. You feel more whole, more grounded, less compelled to chase intensity or rescue dynamics that mirror old wounds. This wholeness is quiet, but it is unmistakable. There is no shame in having repeated patterns. They are signs of resilience, of a system that learned to adapt in order to survive. Honoring that resilience while choosing something new is an act of integration, not rejection. You are not abandoning your past selves. You are releasing them from roles they no longer need to play. When you stop trying to convince yourself that this time will be different and start listening to what is actually happening in your body and energy, something profound shifts. You move out of reenactment and into presence. You stop living from memory and begin living from choice. This does not mean life becomes perfect. It means it becomes honest. And honesty, though sometimes painful at first, is deeply liberating. It allows relationships to arise that are not echoes of old wounds, but expressions of present truth. It allows connection to be rooted in mutual clarity, rather than unconscious familiarity. It allows the soul to finally rest, knowing that it no longer needs to repeat the past in order to be seen. Many present relationships are echoes of old memories, yes, but echoes fade when the source is acknowledged. When you recognize the pattern, honor the lesson, and choose alignment over repetition, the sound slowly quiets. In that quiet, something new becomes possible, not because you tried harder, but because you listened more deeply. 8. Your body knows before the mind. There is a kind of intelligence that does not speak in words, does not argue, does not persuade, and does not demand belief. Yet it has been guiding you faithfully since long before you learned how to explain yourself to the world. And that intelligence lives in the body. The body does not analyze life the way the mind does. It does not weigh pros and cons. It does not reinterpret signals to preserve attachment. And it does not soften truth to avoid discomfort. The body simply registers what is happening and responds accordingly, with precision that is both humble and profound. When people say the body does not lie, they often underestimate what that really means. It does not mean the body reacts dramatically or emotionally. It means the body communicates through sensation, timing, and pattern. A tightening in the chest that appears without warning. A heaviness in the stomach that arrives after certain conversations. a fog that settles in the mind after specific interactions, even when everything seemed polite and calm on the surface. These are not random feelings. They are not imagination. They are biological and energetic data being delivered in real time. The body evolved to detect safety and threat long before language existed. Long before you learned to rationalize, justify, or override your own perceptions, the body learned how to read the environment with extraordinary accuracy. It senses coherence or incoherence, alignment or misalignment, not through thought but through resonance. When something is right, the body softens, breathing deepens, muscles release. When something is off, the body contracts, breath becomes shallow, tension accumulates. This response is not a judgment, it is a signal. Many people have been taught, directly or indirectly, to distrust this intelligence. They were told they were too sensitive, too emotional, too reactive. Over time, they learned to listen to their thoughts instead, believing that logic would keep them safe, where instinct could not. The result of this conditioning is a deep internal split, where the body signals one thing and the mind insists on another. Living in this split requires constant effort, and that effort becomes so familiar that people forget it is even happening. One of the most painful consequences of ignoring bodily knowing is confusion. When the body is sending clear signals, and the mind keeps overriding them, clarity dissolves. You begin to question yourself. You wonder why you feel unsettled without a clear reason. You look for explanations outside yourself, instead of trusting what is already present. Over time, this erodes self-trust, not because the body stops speaking, but because its language is consistently dismissed. The body communicates before the mind has time to construct a narrative. This is why discomfort often appears suddenly, without explanation. The mind then rushes in to make sense of it, sometimes dismissing it, sometimes reframing it, sometimes blaming it on stress, hunger, or mood. While these explanations can occasionally be accurate, they are often used to silence a deeper truth that feels inconvenient or threatening to existing attachments. There is a difference between fear-based reaction and intuitive response, and the body knows the difference even when the mind does not. Fear-based reaction is sharp, chaotic, and urgent. It pushes you toward immediate action without grounding. Intuitive response is quieter. It feels steady, even when it brings discomfort. It does not demand drama. It simply informs. Learning to distinguish between these two requires patience, because both are felt physically, but their quality is different. One agitates, the other clarifies. Many people only begin to understand the body's wisdom after ignoring it for too long. They look back and realize that every major mistake was preceded by a physical signal they dismissed. The knot in the stomach they talked themselves out of. The tightness in the chest they called anxiety. The exhaustion they blamed on work. These realizations can bring regret, but they can also bring liberation, because they reveal that the guidance system was never broken. It was only unheard. The body does not communicate in absolutes. It does not say stay or leave, yes or no, in the way the mind wants. It communicates in degrees. It tells you when something is slightly off, when it becomes more off, and when it is no longer sustainable. This gradual communication allows for choice and adjustment, but only if you are listening. When signals are ignored repeatedly, they tend to intensify, not as punishment, but as protection. There is a deep tenderness required in rebuilding trust with the body, especially for those who have lived disconnected from it for years. Listening again can feel overwhelming at first, because sensations you learn to ignore begin to surface. This does not mean you are regressing. It means awareness is returning. The body has been holding information patiently, waiting for you to be ready to receive it. One of the simplest ways to reconnect with bodily knowing is to notice what happens after interactions rather than during them. During conversations, the mind is often active, engaged, managing impressions. Afterward, when the system has space to settle, the truth often becomes clearer. Do you feel expanded or contracted? Do you feel energized or depleted? Do you feel more yourself or slightly lost? These reflections are not intellectual evaluations. They are somatic responses revealing whether your energy was nourished or drained. The body also responds to authenticity. When you speak truth that aligns with your inner state, Even if it is difficult, the body often relaxes afterward. When you suppress truth to maintain harmony, the body tightens, even if the interaction appears smooth. Over time, these patterns become unmistakable. The body begins to feel like an ally rather than an obstacle, offering constant feedback about whether you are honoring yourself or abandoning yourself. There is also an important distinction between discomfort that leads to growth and discomfort that signals misalignment. Growth discomfort feels challenging but expansive. It stretches you without compressing your core. Misalignment discomfort feels constrictive. It narrows your breath. It reduces your sense of agency. The body recognizes this difference instantly, even when the mind confuses the two. Learning to trust this distinction changes how you approach relationships, decisions, and commitments. Many people fear listening to their body because they worry it will force drastic change. In reality, the body rarely demands sudden upheaval. It invites gradual alignment. It asks for small adjustments, honest conversations, gentle boundaries. When these invitations are honored early, dramatic interventions become unnecessary. When they are ignored, the body eventually creates stronger signals to ensure its message is received. The wisdom of the body is not mystical. It is practical. It is grounded. It is concerned with sustainability rather than ideals. It asks whether your system can continue like this without harm. It does not care how things look from the outside. It cares how they feel on the inside. This makes it a deeply trustworthy guide, especially in a culture that prioritizes appearance over experience. As you learn to listen, something shifts in your relationship with yourself. Decisions become simpler, not because life is easier, but because internal conflict decreases. You no longer need to convince yourself that something is right or wrong. You feel it. This feeling is not emotional reactivity. It is embodied knowing. It carries a quiet authority that does not require defense. Honoring bodily intelligence also changes how you relate to others. You stop projecting responsibility onto them for how you feel. You recognize your responses as information rather than accusations. This allows for cleaner communication and clearer boundaries. You no longer need to prove that something is harmful in order to step back. The fact that your body contracts is enough. There is profound healing in realizing that your body has always been on your side. Even when it expressed itself through anxiety, fatigue, or pain, it was trying to protect you, to slow you down, to redirect you toward alignment. These signals were never punishments. They were messages delivered in the only language that could cut through the noise of rationalization. When you trust your body again, you stop outsourcing authority. You stop asking everyone else what you should feel. You stop overriding your own signals to maintain peace. You begin to live from the inside out rather than the outside in. This shift does not make you rigid or selfish. It makes you coherent. Your body knows before your mind because it is closer to truth. It is closer to the present moment. It is not invested in stories about who you should be or what you should tolerate. It simply responds to what is. When you learn to listen without fear, the body becomes a compass, quietly guiding you toward environments, relationships, and choices that support your wholeness rather than fragment it. This knowing is not loud. It does not demand attention. It waits. And when you finally turn toward it with respect, it meets you with something deeply reassuring, a sense of home within yourself that does not depend on external validation. In that home, clarity returns, not as certainty about the future, but as trust in your ability to navigate whatever arises. The body has always known. The work now is not to teach it anything new, but to remember how to listen, gently and consistently, until its language feels familiar again. When that happens, life begins to feel less confusing, not because uncertainty disappears, but because you are no longer disconnected from the most reliable guide you have ever had. 9. Saying no is not rejection. It is recalibration. There comes a moment on any honest path where the word no rises quietly from within, not as anger, not as defiance, but as clarity, and that moment is often misunderstood by both the one who speaks it and the one who hears it. We have been taught to associate no with judgment, abandonment, or cruelty, as if choosing ourselves automatically means dismissing someone else. Yet this interpretation comes from fear rather than truth. When no arises from awareness, it is not an attack. It is a return. It is the soul choosing to realign with its own trajectory after drifting, sometimes gently and sometimes painfully, off course. Saying no to an energy does not mean condemning the person who carries it. It does not mean labeling them wrong, unworthy, or lesser. Energy is not identity. It is movement, pattern, and state. When you say no, you are not making a statement about who someone is. You are making a statement about where you are going. This distinction is subtle, but it changes everything. Without it, no feels like violence. With it, no becomes a form of care, a refusal to continue, a dynamic that requires distortion in order to persist. Many people struggle to say no because familiarity feels safer than alignment. The familiar carries history, memories, and shared language. It feels known, even when it is uncomfortable. Alignment, on the other hand, often feels uncertain at first. It asks you to trust something internal rather than something proven. It invites you to step forward without guarantees. The nervous system, conditioned by past experiences, may interpret this uncertainty as danger, even when the body is actually asking for freedom. When you choose familiarity over alignment repeatedly, you may maintain connection, but you slowly lose coherence. The price is paid quietly. You compromise intuition. You postpone truth. You tell yourself that timing will improve or that circumstances will change. Over time, this postponement becomes a habit, and the habit becomes a way of life. Saying no interrupts this cycle. It stops the momentum of self-abandonment before it becomes irreversible. It is important to recognize that no is not a fixed position. It is not always permanent. Often, it is a pause, a recalibration, a moment of truth that allows the system to reset. When you say no from a grounded place, you create space for reality to reorganize. Sometimes, the relationship shifts into a healthier form. Sometimes, it dissolves. Sometimes, distance reveals possibilities that were invisible within closeness. None of these outcomes can be controlled, and that is part of the surrender involved. The fear surrounding no often comes from the belief that connection must be maintained at all costs. This belief is deeply rooted in survival conditioning. Many people learned early that belonging required compliance, that safety depended on being agreeable, that love was conditional upon meeting others' expectations. In this context, saying no feels like risking exile. The body remembers these old stakes even when the present situation is different. Learning to say no, then, becomes not just a relational act, but a healing one. When no arises from awareness, it is usually preceded by a long period of internal negotiation. You try to make things work. You search for understanding. You adjust and readjust. The no does not come easily. It comes after listening deeply, after noticing the cost of staying silent, after realizing that something essential is being compromised. By the time no appears, it is often already overdue. Honoring it is not impulsive. It is corrective. There is a common misconception that spiritual maturity means being endlessly accommodating. In reality, spiritual maturity includes the capacity to discern when accommodation turns into self-erasure. It recognizes that love without boundaries becomes unsustainable. It understands that clarity is kinder than prolonged confusion. Saying no at the right moment can prevent far more pain than saying yes out of fear ever could. Recalibration is a helpful word here because it suggests adjustment rather than opposition. When a compass is recalibrated, it is not rejecting north, it is correcting deviation. In the same way, saying no is the soul correcting its course, realigning with what feels true rather than what feels familiar. This correction may feel uncomfortable, especially if you have been moving in one direction for a long time, but discomfort is not the same as danger. Often, it is the sensation of returning to yourself. There is also a grief that accompanies recalibration. You may mourn the version of the relationship you hoped for. You may grieve the future you imagined. You may feel sadness for the connection that could not meet you where you are now. This grief does not mean your choice was wrong. It means you cared. Allowing yourself to feel this grief without turning back on your truth is one of the most courageous acts of self-respect. Many people delay saying no because they want certainty. They want proof that leaving or stepping back is the right decision. They want assurance that something better will follow. Life rarely offers such guarantees. What it offers instead is integrity. When you act in alignment with your inner knowing, you may not know what comes next, but you know you are not betraying yourself. That knowledge becomes a steady ground beneath your feet, even as circumstances shift. It is also important to understand that no spoken from clarity does not require explanation. You may choose to explain, but you are not obligated to justify your inner alignment. Over-explaining often comes from guilt, from the hope that if the other person understands enough, the discomfort of separation will disappear. Sometimes explanation helps, sometimes it does not. The effectiveness of your no does not depend on being understood. It depends on being honored by you. When you say no without hostility, without blame, without needing to convince, something subtle changes in your energy. You stand differently. You breathe more fully. Your system registers safety because you have listened to it. This embodied integrity communicates more than words ever could. It signals to the field that you are no longer available for dynamics that require self-neglect. This signal is often felt by others, even if they cannot articulate it. Choosing mission over familiarity does not mean choosing ambition over love. Mission, in this sense, is not a career or a task. It is the deeper orientation of your life, the direction your energy wants to move in order to remain alive and coherent. When you prioritize this orientation, you are not abandoning connection. You are ensuring that any connection you maintain can meet you without distortion. There is a quiet empowerment that comes after saying no from truth. It is not pride. It is relief. The constant internal debate quiets. The body settles. You may still feel sadness or uncertainty, but beneath it is a sense of alignment that feels stabilizing. You begin to trust yourself again, not because you were perfect in your decision, but because you were honest. It is also worth acknowledging that saying no may trigger reactions in others. People accustomed to your accommodation may feel confused or hurt. This does not mean you have done something wrong. It means the dynamic has changed. You are not responsible for managing their response. Compassion does not require self-sacrifice. You can hold care while maintaining your boundary. You can remain respectful without returning to patterns that depleted you. Over time, the practice of saying no becomes less dramatic. It loses its charge. It becomes a natural response rather than a moral dilemma. You begin to sense earlier when something is misaligned, and the no arises gently, before resentment or exhaustion set in. This is not hardening. It is refinement. It reflects a nervous system that trusts itself enough to act without crisis. Saying no also creates space for yes to emerge more clearly. When your energy is no longer tied up maintaining misalignment, you have more capacity to recognize and receive what truly resonates. Opportunities feel simpler. Connections feel cleaner. You do not have to work as hard to determine what belongs. The field responds to your clarity with coherence of its own. Perhaps the most important realization is this: no does not end love. It changes its form. Sometimes love continues as respect, sometimes as gratitude, sometimes as release. All of these are valid expressions of care. What no ends is the expectation that you must remain misaligned in order to be worthy of connection. When you allow no to be an act of recalibration rather than rejection, you reclaim authorship of your life. You stop drifting in response to external pulls and begin moving with intention. This movement is not aggressive. It is quiet and decisive. It does not announce itself. It simply unfolds. In choosing your trajectory over familiarity, you are not turning away from others. You are turning toward yourself. And when you do that with honesty and gentleness, life tends to meet you there. Not with punishment, but with a surprising sense of rightness. That sense does not eliminate uncertainty, but it anchors you within it. Saying no, when it arises from truth, is not a closing. It is an opening to a life that no longer requires constant negotiation with your own knowing. It is the moment you stop asking permission to align. It is the moment you remember that your path matters, not because it is superior, but because it is yours. 10. Truth does not need argument to exist. There is a quiet quality to truth that often goes unnoticed in a world accustomed to noise, explanation, and persuasion. Truth does not raise its voice. It does not push. It does not demand agreement. It simply is. When something is true for you, there is a subtle sense of recognition that settles into the body, a feeling of alignment that does not require you to convince yourself or rehearse reasons in order to stay. This recognition is not dramatic or overwhelming. It is calm. It is steady. It feels like coming home rather than arriving somewhere new. Many people confuse intensity with truth, believing that if something feels strong, urgent, or emotionally charged, it must be meaningful. In reality, intensity often arises from conflict within the system. It appears when different parts of you are pulling in opposite directions, when desire and intuition are not aligned, when hope is trying to override knowing. Truth, by contrast, tends to arrive without force. It does not need to justify itself. It does not require a list of reasons to remain intact. It holds its shape quietly, even when circumstances are uncertain. When a connection is right for you, you may still experience challenges, misunderstandings, or growth-oriented discomfort. But beneath these experiences, there is a consistent sense of clarity. You do not spend long hours negotiating with yourself about whether to stay. You do not feel the need to gather evidence to explain your own feelings. You may reflect, you may consider, but there is no chronic inner debate. The mind does not have to work overtime to maintain coherence because coherence is already present. In contrast, when a connection is misaligned, the mind becomes busy. You explain, you rationalize, you search for context that makes discomfort acceptable. You replay conversations, you reinterpret signals, you construct narratives that soften the impact of what you feel in your body. This mental activity can feel productive, even responsible, but it is often a sign that truth is being negotiated rather than honored. The more reasons you need to stay, the more likely it is that something essential is being overridden. Truth carries a sense of quiet inevitability. It does not rush you, but it does not disappear when ignored. It waits. It remains accessible beneath layers of justification and fear. Even when you turn away from it temporarily, it continues to signal through subtle cues, through the body, through mood, through a persistent feeling that something is unfinished. This persistence is not punishment. It is integrity. Truth does not abandon you simply because you are not ready to face it. One of the reasons truth feels so threatening is because it does not negotiate with familiar identities. It does not care how long you have invested, how much you have hoped, or how carefully you have built your story. It does not judge these things, but it does not bend to them either. Truth respects reality more than attachment. This respect can feel harsh when attachment is strong, but it is ultimately liberating because it frees you from the exhaustion of maintaining what is no longer real. There is also a cultural tendency to equate explanation with wisdom. We believe that if we can articulate something clearly enough, it becomes valid. While articulation has its place, truth does not depend on language. Many of the most important recognitions in life are felt long before they are spoken. The body knows. The nervous system responds. Breath changes. Presence shifts. Words come later, if at all. Trying to force clarity through explanation often delays the very understanding it seeks to create. A truthful connection does not require you to constantly reassure yourself. You may still have questions, but they do not undermine your sense of ground. There is room for uncertainty without panic. You feel held by something deeper than certainty. This holding is not romantic or idealized. It is practical. It shows up as ease in your body, as a reduction in self-doubt, as a sense that you can be yourself without constant adjustment. When a place, a relationship, or a path truly belongs to you, it does not demand performance. You do not have to be smaller or brighter or more agreeable to remain welcome. You are not required to silence your intuition to preserve harmony. There is space for honesty without threat. There is room for rest without guilt. This does not mean everything is effortless, but it does mean effort is not spent maintaining a false version of yourself. The phrase home is often used metaphorically, yet its meaning is deeply embodied. Home is not where you are always comfortable, but where you are not constantly on guard. It is where your system can settle without scanning for danger. It is where silence feels supportive rather than tense. When you find yourself needing many reasons to stay somewhere, it is often because your system does not recognize it as home. even if your mind wants it to be. Many people stay in misaligned situations because they fear what will happen if they stop explaining themselves into endurance. They worry that leaving or changing course will invalidate the past or waste effort. In truth, honoring present clarity does not erase what came before. It integrates it. It allows the past to remain meaningful without forcing it to dictate the future. Staying where truth has grown quiet does not honor history. It traps it. Truth also has a timing that cannot be rushed. You may sense it before you are ready to act on it. This does not make you dishonest. It makes you human. The important thing is not immediate action, but internal acknowledgement. The moment you stop arguing with yourself, something shifts. Even if circumstances remain the same for a while, your relationship with reality changes. You begin to move with awareness rather than denial. This shift alone can restore a surprising amount of energy and peace. There is a gentle confidence that emerges when you stop demanding proof from truth. You no longer ask whether your clarity is justified. You no longer need others to agree in order to trust yourself. This confidence is not arrogance. It is groundedness. It allows you to remain open without being porous, to listen without collapsing, to care without abandoning yourself. You become less reactive because there is less internal conflict to defend. One of the most subtle signs of alignment is simplicity. Not simplicity of life circumstances, but simplicity of inner experience. Choices feel cleaner. Responses feel more direct. You spend less time rehearsing conversations or managing impressions. This simplicity is not achieved through discipline. It arises naturally when you are no longer negotiating with truth. Energy that was previously tied up in explanation becomes available for living. It is also worth noting that truth does not promise comfort. Sometimes, it asks you to let go of what you love. Sometimes, it leads you through grief or uncertainty. The difference is that even when truth brings discomfort, it does not bring confusion. There is a sense of rightness beneath the pain. You may not like what is happening, but you recognize its integrity. This recognition allows you to move through difficulty without losing yourself. When you find yourself needing many reasons to stay, it is often because truth is quietly pointing elsewhere. This does not mean you must leave immediately or dramatically. It means something inside you is asking to be heard. Listening does not always require action, but it always requires honesty. You can acknowledge that something no longer feels like home without knowing where home will be next. Truth does not compete with hope. It refines it. It shifts hope from being about a specific outcome to being about alignment itself. You stop hoping that a situation will change so you can feel at peace, and instead, allow peace to guide which situations you participate in. This shift transforms how you relate to uncertainty. The future no longer feels like a threat. It becomes an open space rather than a problem to solve. There is a quiet dignity in allowing truth to stand without argument. It communicates self-respect. It tells your system that you are trustworthy. Over time, this trust compounds. You become less afraid of what you might discover because you know you will respond with care. You stop delaying honesty because you no longer equate it with harm. You understand that truth, when honored gently, tends to heal rather than destroy. Ultimately, truth is not something you acquire. It is something you recognize. It feels familiar because it aligns with what has always been present beneath conditioning and fear. When you stop arguing with it, you free yourself from the exhausting task of maintaining what is not real. You make space for life to meet you where you are, rather than where you think you should be. Where truth is present, there is a sense of quiet permission. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to choose alignment over explanation. You are allowed to trust that you do not need endless reasons to stay somewhere that truly supports you. And where too many reasons are required, you can gently acknowledge that this place, this connection, or this path may not be home anymore. Truth does not need your defense, it needs your presence. When you offer that presence without argument, something simple and profound unfolds. You stop negotiating with reality and begin cooperating with it. In that cooperation, life often becomes less complicated, not because challenges disappear, but because you are no longer divided against yourself. 11. When you change your frequency, the world reorganizes itself. There is a gentle misunderstanding many people carry about change, a belief that transformation must be dramatic, loud, or disruptive in order to be real. And because of this belief, they brace themselves whenever they sense an inner shift, expecting confrontation, loss, or chaos to follow. Yet the deeper truth, the one learned only through lived experience, is that the most profound changes rarely announce themselves. They unfold quietly, almost invisibly, the way seasons change without asking for permission, the way the tide shifts without needing to explain itself to the shore. When you change your frequency, you do not need to close doors loudly or burn bridges to prove your clarity. You do not need grand declarations, ultimatums, or speeches that justify your movement. Alignment does not require performance. It requires presence. The moment you begin to live from your true vibration, rather than from habit, fear, or obligation, the field around you starts to respond in subtle but unmistakable ways. Frequency is not an idea. It is a lived state. It is the sum of how you think, how you feel, how you regulate your nervous system, and how honestly you inhabit your own truth. When this state shifts, your participation in reality shifts with it. You begin to show up differently, not because you decided to act differently, but because acting differently is no longer required to maintain coherence. You speak less from defense. You explain less. You tolerate less confusion. This change may appear minimal from the outside, but energetically it is decisive. One of the most surprising aspects of frequency shifts is how little effort they require once they are genuine. For years, you may have tried to fix situations through discussion, compromise, or endurance, believing that change came from convincing others or pushing yourself harder. When frequency shifts, that effort falls away. You no longer feel compelled to manage outcomes. You stop trying to hold dynamics together with willpower. This release is not indifference. It is trust. Trust that coherence does more work than control ever could. As your frequency changes, certain connections begin to loosen without conflict. Conversations naturally shorten. Invitations quietly fade. Emotional intensity softens. These changes can feel strange at first, especially if you are accustomed to closeness defined by struggle or intensity. You may wonder whether you are doing something wrong by not chasing what once mattered so much. In truth, you are doing something profoundly right. You are allowing resonance to guide proximity rather than attachment. What no longer aligns does not need to be rejected. It simply loses its grip. There is no force involved, no blame, no drama. The relationship, situation, or role that once required constant negotiation now feels distant, not because you pushed it away, but because you stopped feeding it energy that was never meant to sustain it indefinitely. Energy follows attention, and when attention shifts toward truth, distortion cannot compete. At the same time, what does align begins to approach with equal subtlety. You may notice new conversations that feel effortless, new opportunities that arrive without struggle, new people who meet you where you are without requiring translation. These arrivals are not rewards, they are reflections. They mirror the clarity you are now embodying. You do not attract them because you tried harder. You attract them because your signal is clear enough to be recognized. This process often challenges old ideas about loyalty and effort. Many people were taught that staying is noble and leaving is failure, that commitment means holding on regardless of cost. When frequency shifts, these narratives lose their authority. You begin to see that loyalty to misalignment is not virtue. It is fear disguised as principle. True commitment is commitment to truth, even when that truth changes form. There can be a period of quiet in this transition, a space where the old has fallen away but the new has not fully arrived. This space is often mistaken for emptiness or loss, but it is actually recalibration. The system is adjusting to a new baseline. The nervous system is learning that safety no longer depends on over-adaptation. In this pause, it is tempting to revert to old patterns simply to fill the silence. Patience here is essential. The silence is not absence, it is integration. One of the most healing realizations in this phase is understanding that you do not need to chase alignment. Alignment is not something you pursue. It is something you allow by removing what is false. When you stop investing energy in dynamics that require self-betrayal, you free that energy to support what is true. Life does not need to be forced into order. It naturally reorganizes around coherence. People often fear that changing frequency will isolate them, that they will lose connection and end up alone. While some connections may fall away, isolation is not the natural outcome of alignment. Isolation comes from fear-based boundaries. Alignment-based living tends to attract fewer but deeper connections. Relationships rooted in mutual clarity rather than obligation. These connections may take time to appear, but when they do, they feel nourishing rather than consuming. There is also a humility required in this process, because frequency shifts do not make you superior or immune to challenge. They simply change the kind of challenges you face. Instead of constantly negotiating your worth or managing emotional turbulence, you may face the challenge of trusting ease, of allowing life to support you without suspicion. For those accustomed to struggle, ease can feel unfamiliar, even unsafe. Learning to rest in it is part of the work. As your frequency stabilizes, you may notice that you respond differently to situations that once triggered you. You are less reactive, not because you suppress emotion, but because there is less internal conflict to defend. You do not need to prove yourself. You do not need to convince others. Your presence carries its own authority. This authority is not loud, it is grounded. It comes from alignment rather than assertion. Another subtle change is how time feels. When you are out of alignment, time feels heavy, stretched, or wasted. When you are aligned, even ordinary moments feel more alive. This is not because life becomes exciting all the time, but because you are no longer expending energy resisting yourself. Energy conserved becomes energy available. You begin to experience life more fully, not because circumstances improve dramatically, but because your participation is less fragmented. It is also important to understand that not everyone will understand your shift. Some people may feel confused by your calm. Others may interpret your boundaries as distance or rejection. You do not need to correct these interpretations. Explanation is not required for alignment to be valid. Those who can resonate with your new frequency will feel it without words. Those who cannot may drift away without ever naming why. This is not a failure of communication. It is a natural sorting. When you live in your true frequency, you stop trying to arrange your life according to external expectations. You make choices based on internal coherence rather than social pressure. This does not make you rigid or selfish. It makes you responsive. You listen more closely to your body. You trust your timing. You allow decisions to emerge rather than forcing them. This way of living feels slower at first, but it is ultimately more efficient because it reduces unnecessary struggle. There is a deep sense of relief that comes when you realize you do not need to manage endings. Endings happen on their own when alignment shifts. You do not need to decide who stays or goes. Your frequency does that for you. This does not remove responsibility. It reframes it. Your responsibility becomes staying honest with yourself rather than orchestrating outcomes. Over time, you begin to notice that life feels less adversarial. Challenges still arise, but they do not feel personal. You meet them with curiosity rather than defense. This shift is subtle but transformative. It reflects a system that trusts its ability to respond rather than control. Control is a sign of fear. Responsiveness is a sign of confidence rooted in experience. When you change your frequency, you also change what you tolerate. This does not make you harsh. It makes you clear. You no longer need to convince yourself that something is acceptable when your body says otherwise. You no longer override discomfort to preserve appearance. This clarity is not rigid. It is compassionate because it prevents prolonged confusion for everyone involved. Perhaps the most profound aspect of this process is how ordinary it feels once it is integrated. Alignment does not feel like a constant peak experience. It feels like normalcy returning. You stop feeling like you are swimming upstream. You stop questioning every decision. You stop waiting for permission to be yourself. This ordinariness is not dull. It is deeply nourishing. You may look back and realize that much of what you feared never happened. Doors closed quietly. Relationships changed shape without catastrophe. New paths appeared without struggle. The drama you anticipated was largely internal, fueled by old beliefs about change needing to be painful. Reality, when met with honesty, is often far kinder than imagination. When you remain in your true vibration, life becomes collaborative rather than combative. You are no longer forcing alignment. You are participating in it. This participation feels like cooperation with something larger than you, not in a mystical sense, but in a practical one. You move with what is unfolding rather than against it. This does not eliminate uncertainty, but it makes uncertainty livable. In the end, changing your frequency is not about becoming someone new. It is about releasing who you are not. It is about allowing your natural state to reassert itself after years of adaptation. When this happens, the world does not collapse. It reorganizes. It reshapes itself around your truth because truth is structurally sound. You do not need to announce this change. You do not need to justify it. You do not need to prove it. Simply staying present in your authentic frequency is enough. What does not belong will fall away without argument. What does belong will arrive without effort. And in that quiet rearrangement, you may discover that life has been waiting all along for you to stop forcing and start aligning. This is not passivity. It is wisdom earned through experience. It is the understanding that reality responds most faithfully, not to effort, but to coherence. When you live from that coherence, the world meets you there, not because you demanded it to, but because alignment is its own invitation. Returning to inner knowing, you were not born to live in constant negotiation with your own intuition, weighing every inner signal against external approval, translating what you feel into something acceptable before you allow yourself to trust it. You did not come here to learn how to endure connections that quietly shrink you, asking you to be smaller, quieter, or more accommodating than your truth requires. You came here to remember something simpler and far more powerful than endurance. You came here to broadcast. To broadcast does not mean to perform or convince. It does not mean to announce yourself loudly or prove your worth through effort. It means to live as a clear frequency, honest and unforced, allowing who you are to be felt rather than explained. A clear frequency does not argue for its existence. It does not chase recognition. It simply stands in coherence, and in doing so, it invites life to respond in kind. There is a profound difference between surviving and transmitting. Survival is reactive. It watches closely, adjusts constantly, and braces for loss. Transmission is relaxed. It trusts its signal. It moves forward without needing to monitor every response. Many people spend years believing they are choosing safety when they are actually choosing familiarity. Familiarity feels secure because it is known, even when it is heavy. Clarity feels risky because it is new, even when it is light. Learning to choose clarity over familiarity is not an act of courage once. It is a practice that deepens with time. When you finally choose clarity, you may initially feel grief rather than triumph. You may grieve the versions of yourself that learned to stay quiet, to remain connected. You may grieve the relationships that mattered deeply but could not meet you without distortion. You may grieve the time spent doubting what you knew in your body all along. This grief is not a setback. It is a release. It is the weight leaving your system, making space for breath to return. What often surprises people is that clarity does not arrive with fireworks. It arrives with relief, a subtle softening in the chest, a deeper exhale, a sense that you no longer need to hold everything together. The loss you feared turns out to be the tension you have been carrying for far too long. What you thought was abandonment reveals itself as spaciousness. What you thought was failure reveals itself as alignment. Inner knowing does not shout. It does not compete with noise. It waits patiently beneath the surface, offering guidance in moments of stillness, in sensations that rise and fall, in quiet nudges that ask for honesty rather than certainty. When you learn to listen to this knowing, you stop outsourcing authority. You stop asking the world to tell you who you are. You stop mistaking intensity for truth. You begin to recognize that truth feels calm, even when it asks you to change. Returning to inner knowing is not about becoming perfect or unshakable. It is about becoming congruent. When your thoughts, your body, and your actions move in the same direction, life becomes simpler. Not easier in the way comfort promises, but easier in the way integrity does. You spend less energy managing contradiction. You waste less time convincing yourself to stay in situations that require constant explanation. You begin to trust that what feels right does not need constant defense. There is a quiet humility in this trust. You realize that you do not need to be right to be aligned. You do not need to be understood to be true. You do not need to win arguments or preserve narratives to honor your path. You learn to let go of the urge to prove, to persuade, to justify. This letting go is not resignation. It is liberation. It frees your energy to be used for living rather than maintaining appearances. As you return to inner knowing, your relationship with uncertainty changes. Uncertainty no longer feels like a threat to your safety. It becomes a neutral space, an open field where possibilities can emerge without pressure. You stop demanding guarantees from the future. You trust your capacity to respond when the time comes. This trust is earned, not assumed. It grows each time you listen to yourself and witness the consequences of that listening bring you closer to wholeness. You may notice that your life becomes quieter in certain ways. Fewer dramatic highs and lows. Fewer crises born of avoidance. Fewer emotional entanglements that require constant repair. This quiet is not emptiness. It is stability. It is the nervous system settling into a rhythm that does not require constant vigilance. In this rhythm, joy becomes simpler. Presence becomes more accessible. Rest becomes restorative rather than temporary. Returning to inner knowing also refines your relationships. You begin to recognize which connections support your coherence and which ones rely on your self-abandonment. You stop confusing obligation with love. You allow distance to form where closeness requires distortion. This does not make you colder. It makes your warmth sustainable. The connections that remain are fewer, perhaps, but they feel cleaner. They meet you where you are rather than where you pretend to be. There is a gentle authority that emerges when you live from inner knowing. It is not control. It is not dominance. It is steadiness. You speak less, but your words carry more weight. You explain less, but your choices are clearer. You no longer need to manage how others perceive you because you are no longer managing yourself. This authority is felt rather than declared. It arises naturally from coherence. Many people wait for external permission to trust themselves. They wait for validation, confirmation, or a sign dramatic enough to override doubt. Inner knowing does not operate on that timeline. It offers subtle confirmations that accumulate over time. A sense of ease after a difficult decision. A return of energy after setting a boundary. A clarity that replaces confusion when you stop arguing with what you feel. These confirmations may not impress the mind, but they reassure the body, and the body is where trust lives. When you live as a clear frequency, you stop trying to hold on to what is not meant to stay. You stop chasing what does not resonate. You allow life to organize itself around your truth, rather than forcing yourself to fit into its expectations. This organization does not happen overnight, and it does not always look the way you imagined, but it happens reliably, because coherence is structurally sound. What aligns finds stability. What does not align loses momentum. It is important to remember that choosing clarity does not mean choosing isolation. It means choosing relationships that do not require you to disappear. It means choosing work that does not drain your life force. It means choosing rhythms that support your nervous system rather than overwhelm it. These choices accumulate, quietly reshaping your life into something that feels livable rather than impressive. There may still be moments when doubt returns. This does not mean you have failed. It means you are human. Inner knowing is not a static state. It is a relationship that deepens with attention. When doubt arises, you can meet it gently, not as an enemy, but as a signal to slow down and listen again. You do not need to eradicate doubt to live in truth. You need to stop letting doubt override your body's intelligence. As you return to inner knowing, you may find that your desires simplify. You want less, but you want what you want more, honestly. You become less interested in being admired and more interested in being at peace. You become less willing to sacrifice your well-being for approval. This shift is not a loss of ambition. It is a refinement of values. You begin to measure success by how aligned you feel, rather than how impressive your life appears. There is a deep kindness in this way of living. It is kind to yourself because it reduces unnecessary suffering. It is kind to others because it does not invite them into dynamics built on confusion or pretense. Clarity prevents resentment. Honesty prevents prolonged harm. Even when choices are difficult, they are cleaner. They leave less residue behind. If there is something in you that has been nodding quietly throughout this journey, that subtle recognition you feel when words land not as information but as memory, trust it. You do not need additional proof. You do not need to cross-examine your intuition. The quiet yes inside you is not naive. It is ancient. It has been guiding you through every moment of confusion, waiting for you to stop arguing long enough to hear it. Returning to inner knowing is not about becoming someone else. It is about releasing the layers of adaptation that once kept you safe but now keep you small. It is about allowing your natural signal to reassert itself without apology. When you do this, life does not demand that you fight for your place. It makes room for you. You were never meant to live in constant doubt. You were meant to live in alignment. You were meant to experience relationships that expand rather than diminish you. You were meant to rest in your own presence without fear. And when you choose clarity over familiarity, again and again, you may discover that what you feared losing was never truly sustaining you. What you gain is not something new. It is the relief your soul has been waiting for all along. Stay with that relief. Let it guide you. Let it be enough.